My son and his wife kicked me out of my own house on Christmas Eve while they laughed and popped champagne. I walked out with nothing but my old coat and a broken heart. They thought I'd never rise again, but years later, when they walked into my office begging for a job, I smiled because I finally had the power. The lights outside my little house blinked red and green, struggling against the snowstorm. I had spent the whole day cooking: roast turkey, apple pie, mashed potatoes, the same dishes Daniel used to beg for when he was a boy. I kept checking the clock, smoothing my old red sweater, whispering to myself, "He'll come," he promised. At 7 p.m., headlights flashed through the window. My heart jumped. I hurried to the door, smiling wide enough to hide the tremble in my hands. Daniel stepped in first, tall, handsome, too thin from stress. Behind him came Samantha, my daughter-in-law, wrapped in a fur coat that probably cost more than my monthly bills. She looked around like she had stepped into a stranger's attic. "Mom," Daniel said softly, half smiling. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," I whispered. I reached for a hug, but Samantha brushed past me, shaking snow from her boots. "This place is freezing," she muttered. "Are you still using that old heater?" I tried to laugh it off. "It works just fine. Dinner's almost ready. Sit, warm up." She wrinkled her nose at the tinsel I'd hung over the window. "Daniel, you didn't tell me your mom still decorates like it's 1980. Daniel said nothing. He just stared at the table I'd set: 3 plates, candles, and the centerpiece I made from pine cones. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Samantha scrolled on her phone. Daniel poked at his food. I kept pouring gravy no one wanted. Then Samantha set down her fork. "Let's not drag this out," she said. My stomach tightened. "Drag what out?" Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, we wanted to talk to you about something important." My hands froze around the serving spoon. "Is everything okay?" He looked away. "We found a new place. Bigger, closer to work." I smiled nervously. "That's wonderful. I can help you pack." He swallowed hard. "That's the thing, Mom. You can't come with us." For a moment I didn't understand. The clock ticked loud behind him. The smell of pie filled the air. Too sweet, too heavy. I don't follow," I said. Samantha folded her arms. "Daniel and I need our own space. You're always around, always needing something. We're newly married, and honestly, living with an old person is hard." Her words hit like ice water. Daniel didn't defend me. He just whispered, "It's for the best, Mom." I looked at him, the same boy I once carried on my hip through every storm. "For the best?" I said softly. "You're kicking me out. On Christmas?" Samantha laughed lightly. "You'll be fine. Maybe there's a nice senior home nearby. They probably decorate better than this." I felt my chest tighten. I stood up slowly, gripping the edge of the table for balance. "You know," I said, "when your father died, I promised him I'd always protect you. I never thought the day would come when I'd need protection from you." Daniel's eyes watered for half a second. Then he looked away. "Please don't make this harder." The wind howled outside. I reached for my coat. My keys jingled in my shaky hands. "Where will you go?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I said. "But somewhere I can still believe in family." I opened the door. Cold air rushed in, blowing out one of the candles. Samantha whispered something I couldn't hear, but I caught the sound of her laugh. Soft, careless, cruel. I stepped outside into the falling snow. The street was empty, quiet except for the crunch beneath my boots. My breath turned white in the air as I walked away from the only home I'd ever known. When I reached the corner, I looked back once. Through the window, I saw them clinking glasses, their faces warm in the golden light. That was the moment my heart cracked. But somewhere beneath the pain, something else was born. Not anger. Not hatred, but the smallest spark of strength. I whispered into the cold night. "Someday, Daniel. Someday you'll remember what you did tonight." And I kept walking, one step at a time, through the snow, toward a future I couldn't yet see. When your own child turns you away on Christmas night, the world suddenly feels too big, too cold, and too empty. I didn't know where to go, only that I had no one left. Snowflakes landed on my lashes as I walked down the silent street. Every house glowed with laughter, clinking glasses and music. Families celebrating warmth, while I searched for a place to exist. Each window I passed felt like a memory pressed against glass, untouchable. I kept whispering Daniel's name under my breath, as if he might call me back. But the only sound was the crunch of my boots and the wind cutting through my coat. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message. For a second, I thought it might be him. It wasn't. It was a reminder from the electric company. Final notice, payment due. I laughed bitterly. Perfect timing, I muttered. I ended up at a small 24-hour diner near the old gas station. The neon sign buzzed like it was trying to stay alive. Inside, the smell of coffee and burnt toast welcomed me better than any family had that night. "Coffee, hon?" the waitress asked. Her name tag read Lily. "Yes, please. Something hot." She poured me a cup and gave me a kind smile, the kind that hurts when you haven't seen it in a while. Rubbing my hands around the mug, I tried to think of someone, anyone, who might take me in. My sister Mary? We hadn't spoken since the funeral. My neighbor Tom? He barely said hello. For the first time in my life, I felt like a ghost, alive but unseen. Rough night? Lily asked softly. You could say that, I whispered. My son just decided I wasn't family anymore, she frowned. Honey, no one deserves that. Her kindness cracked something inside me. My eyes filled with tears I didn't want her to see. I don't know where I'll sleep tonight, I admitted. Lily hesitated, then said, There's a small motel 2 blocks down. The owner's nice. He lets people stay cheap when it's cold. Tell him Lily sent you. I thanked her, finished the coffee, and stepped back into the freezing night. The motel was old, paint peeling, sign flickering. The man at the desk gave me a room for $20. It smelled like damp carpet and cigarettes, but it was a shelter. That night, I lay on the thin bed staring at the ceiling. My heart ached so deeply it almost felt physical. But in that silence, I also made myself a promise. If life has taken everything from me, I'll rebuild from nothing. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but something deep in my chest whispered, You're not done yet. Weeks passed. I sold old clothes, washed dishes at the diner Lily worked in, and saved every dollar. Every time Daniel's name crossed my mind, my heart burned, not with hate, but with determination. Lily became my only friend. She'd tell me stories about her life, about dreams she'd given up on. You should open your own bakery, she once said, watching me knead dough during a break. Your pies could heal hearts, I smiled faintly. I used to bake for my son every Christmas. He said no one made apple pie like me. Then prove him right, she said simply. Her words stuck. That night, I sat in my small motel room sketching ideas, names, recipes, dreams. I didn't have money, but I had will, and sometimes that's all you need to start again. Months later, I applied for a small business grant through a community program. I didn't think I'd get it, but I did. They gave me just enough to rent a tiny storefront and buy second-hand baking equipment. When I opened the door to my bakery for the first time, I whispered to myself, You're not just surviving anymore. You're living. The sign above the window read, Grace's Table. Because that's what I wanted to give the world. A little grace, even when life offered none to me. What I didn't know was that years later, that very bakery would become the key to the biggest twist of my life. Because one snowy morning, the door would open again, and standing there would be Daniel and Samantha, looking nothing like the people who once laughed at me. But that's a story for another chapter. Sometimes, the people who break you are the very reason you rise. I thought I'd lost everything that night, but that pain became the fire that rebuilt me. The morning I opened my bakery, the air smelled of sugar, cinnamon, and second chances. The sign above the door, Grace's Table, glowed in soft gold letters. I remember running my hand over the window, tracing the words like a prayer. It wasn't fancy. Old oven, mismatched chairs, faded curtains. But it was mine. Every corner carried the heartbeat of a woman who refused to give up. The first week was slow. One customer here, another there. Some came for coffee, some just for warmth. I smiled at every face, even when fear whispered, What if it fails? Then one morning, something small but magical happened. Lily, My dear friend from the diner walked in holding a basket of flowers. "For your grand opening," she said. "And guess what? I told everyone at the diner to come try your pies." I laughed through tears. "You didn't have to. Grace," she said. "You helped me believe in kindness again. Let's make the world taste that." By noon, the bakery was full. Laughter, chatter, people taking photos of my pies like they were something special. For the first time in years, I felt seen again. That night, I sat alone in the bakery after closing, staring at the empty plates and half-burned candles. I whispered, "You did it." Not to anyone, just to myself. Weeks turned into months. Business grew. Locals started calling me Grandma Grace. Kids came in after school, couples on weekends. I learned their stories, their struggles, because everyone who walked through that door carried some kind of pain. Sometimes I'd glance at families sitting together, laughing, and a small ache would rise in my chest. I missed Daniel. I missed the sound of his voice calling me Mom, but I never called him, not once. Because part of healing is knowing when to stop chasing the ones who left you in the snow. One evening, as I was closing, a man in a suit walked in. He had kind eyes and a calm smile. "Are you Grace?" he asked. "Yes, that's me." "We're closing, but I can still offer you some pie," he chuckled. "Actually, I'm here for something else. My name's Mark Stevens. I own a chain of restaurants downtown. I tried your blueberry pie at a community event last week. It was unforgettable." I blinked. "You tried my pie?" he nodded. "I want to partner with you. I believe your recipes could be part of our new dessert line, if you're interested." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My hands trembled just like they did that Christmas night. But this time, it was from disbelief, not pain. I don't know what to say," I stammered. He smiled warmly. "Say yes, and let's make your name known beyond this little town." I said yes. Of course I did. And just like that, Grace's Table became more than a bakery. It became a brand. Months later, I stood inside a sparkling new office, my name printed on the door, Grace Anderson, Director of Product Development Me, the woman who once had nowhere to go. Now, the woman people came to for opportunities. As the years passed, my story became something whispered with admiration. How a mother left in the snow built an empire of sweetness and resilience. But fate has a strange sense of timing, because one December afternoon, exactly 6 years after that Christmas night, my secretary buzzed my office. "Mrs. Anderson, there's a young couple here asking to see you." They said it's urgent. I looked up from my paperwork. "Did they give their names?" She hesitated. "Yes, Daniel and Samantha Carter." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My pen fell from my hand. My heart, after all these years, began to pound like it used to when he called me Mom. I straightened my blazer, smoothed my silver hair, and said calmly, "Send them in." The door opened, and there they were. Daniel looked older, thinner, his confidence gone. Samantha's expensive coat couldn't hide the desperation in her eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't feel pain. I felt at peace, because life had finally brought them back, not for Christmas dinner, but for mercy. I never imagined I'd see them again, the two people who laughed while I walked out into the cold. But that morning, they walked into my office, trembling, desperate, begging for what they once thought I didn't deserve. The office smelled of fresh coffee and polished wood. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long golden lines across my desk. I sat behind it, my fingers resting lightly on the papers, calm, collected. Not a trace of the woman who once cried in the snow. The door opened, and there they were. Daniel, my son, Samantha, my daughter-in-law. They froze the instant they saw me. Their eyes widened, recognition flickering, panic rising. Daniel swallowed hard. "Mom?" I leaned back in my chair, my gaze steady. "Mrs. Carter, please have a seat." Samantha bit her lip. She didn't speak. She couldn't. I studied them for a moment. The same arrogance they wore that Christmas night was gone. Now it was replaced by fear. Daniel cleared his throat, voice shaky. Our business failed. We don't have any income, and we were hoping you might give us jobs." I raised a brow. "Jobs?" I asked, my voice calm, almost gentle. "You mean the people you laughed at, the person you called useless?" You want me to hire you? Samantha's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, I saw vulnerability in her, a glimmer of regret. Daniel fumbled with his hands. Mom, I know we treated you horribly. We were selfish, please. I'll do anything. I just need a chance to work, to start over. I leaned forward slowly, resting my elbows on the desk. Do you remember that Christmas night? The night you threw me out while you laughed? They nodded. Silence filled the room. I continued, voice low but steady. I walked out into the snow that night with nothing. Nothing but my heart. And I promised myself, if life ever gave me a second chance, I would rise. I never sought revenge. I simply worked. I built my bakery, my business, my life. And now, here you are, begging. Daniel's face turned pale. Samantha's hands shook. I could fire you both before you even step inside, I said. Or, I could hire you, and you would start at the bottom. Prove you're willing to work, earn it. But let me be clear. I am not the same person you knew. They both nodded quickly. Relief and fear danced across their faces. I leaned back, letting silence stretch. You once said I was useless. Tell me, what do you think now? Daniel's throat tightened. You're incredible. I can't believe this is you, Samantha whispered, barely audible. We were wrong. We're so sorry. I allowed a faint smile. Not of joy, not yet. Just a simple acknowledgement of truth. Sometimes, I said softly, the people who break you only teach you how to rebuild stronger. Today, you have a choice. Start over honestly, or leave. I will not save you from your past mistakes. They left my office trembling, humbled, changed. I sat alone for a long moment, letting the quiet settle. For years I'd carried the hurt, the humiliation, the loneliness. And now I felt at peace. Not revenge, not anger, just strength, power, dignity. I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the city skyline beyond the window, and I whispered to myself, this is what it feels like to rise from the snow. After they left my office, silence filled the room. But I knew this was only the beginning. Karma had its way, and the echoes of that Christmas night would follow them forever. The office felt quieter than ever. I sat behind my desk, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching the city streets below. I could still picture Daniel and Samantha, faces pale, hands trembling, eyes wide with realization of what they had lost. It was strange. I had expected anger to rise inside me, maybe even satisfaction. But there was none, only calm. Weeks passed. Slowly, the world outside reflected the consequences of that day. Daniel struggled to rebuild his career. His arrogance had left him unprepared for the real world. Even when he tried to network, doors that once opened freely were now closed. He realized painfully that he could no longer rely on connections or shortcuts. Samantha faced her own reckoning. Friends she had relied on for status drifted away, unimpressed with her desperation. People who once envied her looked past her now, seeing the fragility beneath the polished surface, and I watched it all, not with glee, but with quiet acknowledgement. Life had a way of balancing itself. One afternoon, I met with Henry Brooks and his daughter Claire at my bakery. We sat with coffee and pastries, laughing softly. "Grandma Grace," Claire said, using the nickname the kids in town had given me. "I heard about Daniel and Samantha. Did you mean to teach them a lesson?" I shook my head. "I didn't. I simply stayed true to myself." "That was enough," Henry smiled. "Sometimes karma doesn't need to be forced. You just have to live well. And you did." "That's why they feel it now." I looked out the window. Children were running around the square, families walking in pairs, couples holding hands. Warmth everywhere. I had once thought I'd never belong to that world again. Now I was part of it, in a different way, stronger, wiser, free. Months later, Daniel and Samantha returned, not for forgiveness, not for reconciliation, but to ask for guidance. Daniel's voice was humble. "Mom, I've realized how wrong I was. Can you give me advice?" Samantha's eyes were soft, ashamed. "I never wanted to hurt you. I just..." "Didn't see," I smiled faintly. "Life will teach you its lessons, with or without me. Don't make the same mistakes again." That was all they needed. Nothing more. I closed my ledger that evening and walked to the window. The sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. It reminded me of that first Christmas night, the snow, the cold, the laughter I never wanted to hear again. But now everything is different. I had survived the worst of heartbreak. I had rebuilt my life. I had transformed pain into purpose. The people who try to break you, I whispered to myself, don't own your life. You do. And I knew it, truly knew it, for the first time. That Christmas, I hosted a small dinner at Grace's table, not for Daniel or Samantha. Not for revenge, but for the community that had supported me, the friends who had shown me kindness, and the strangers who became family. We laughed. We shared food. We shared stories. And somewhere in that warmth, I finally let go of the snow, the cold, the loneliness that had haunted me for years. Because life had finally come full circle. After they left my office, silence filled the room. But I knew the consequences of that Christmas night would follow them forever. And in that quiet moment, I finally understood. Happiness doesn't come from being accepted by others. It comes from embracing yourself, your journey, and the power you've earned. Sometimes life breaks you to show you your own strength. And sometimes the people who abandon you end up witnessing your rise, silently. Without ever understanding it, I sat in my office, the city lights twinkling outside like 1,000 tiny reminders of how far I had come. Grace's table had grown beyond my wildest dreams. My team, once just me and Lily, now included talented bakers, managers, and dreamers who believed in the power of second chances, just like I did. I thought about the snow-covered Christmas night when Daniel and Samantha had thrown me out. I remembered the cold, the rejection, the loneliness, and I smiled. Not because I held revenge in my heart, but because I had turned that pain into purpose. Every tear, every sleepless night, every doubt had been a brick in the foundation of my new life. The moral of my story is simple. Life will test you, betray you, and sometimes leave you utterly alone. But your strength lies in how you respond. You can choose bitterness, anger, and revenge. Or you can choose growth, resilience, and empowerment. I chose the latter. And it led me to a life filled with warmth, respect, and fulfillment. Daniel and Samantha never fully understood what they had lost. But that didn't matter, because I had discovered something far more powerful than their recognition. I had discovered myself. I had rebuilt my life. I had created something meaningful. I had learned that no one has the power to define your worth except you. And now, every time someone walks through my bakery door, I see hope in their eyes. I see the possibility of rising again. I see the beauty of life, even after betrayal. So, to everyone listening to my story today, remember this. The people who leave you, the ones who doubt you, and even those who betray you, are not the end of your journey. They are the beginning of your strength. You have the power to rise, to rebuild, and to create a life you love. Life doesn't give second chances to everyone, but when it does, it's not for them, it's for you. And now, if my story inspired you, touched your heart, or reminded you of your own strength, I have a small request. Like this story if it resonated with you. Subscribe to my channel for more true stories of resilience, heartbreak, and triumph. I'd share it with someone who needs a reminder that even after betrayal, they can rise stronger than ever. Because stories like these aren't just entertainment. They're lessons, motivation, and proof that no matter how hard life hits, you can always rise,